Hi everyone, we're going to get started in a few minutes. Let's make sure, has everyone here signed in already? If everyone signed in, and make sure you like us on Facebook too. or follow us on Instagram or Twitter or something, or join our mailing list. We're gonna should we just get started. Hi everyone. Welcome to Landing the Internship. This is an event by Tech at NYU. We're going to basically be going over what is a tech internship. Hopefully you know you're here for the right event. But we're going to be going over what is a tech internship, why might you want one, why might you want one, where you find these internships, how to apply, some basic pointers, what to expect, and yeah, things like that. I'm Michael.
Andrew.
And yeah, we're part of Tech at NYU. Oh, and a bit of a disclaimer is that a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about are going to be pretty biased towards our own personal experiences when applying for internships and things. So just to keep that in mind, it's going to be a little bit subjective. But we'll let you know like when things are more an opinion rather than not. So a little bit of background of Tech at NYU. Hopefully everybody knows what Tech at NYU is, but if you don't, we are a community of artists, makers, hackers. We recently relaunched with a new mission, and we're trying to host events under our three core core pillars, if you will, of career, community, learning, and creativity. So, yeah. Yeah, a bit about me. I'm Michael. I'm a senior. I study computer science at CAS. I worked at Stripe this summer, or previous summer, and then previous to that, I worked at BuzzFeed and Yelp.
Yeah, so I was originally a business major actually, and so last semester as a sophomore, now I'm a double major in CS, and I worked at Amazon last summer.
Yeah, so we want to learn a little more about who we're speaking to. So, like, who here is like a freshman? Okay. What about sophomore? Junior? Senior? Graduate? Cool. All right. And who's never had an internship before? All right. Pretty good number. Makes sense. Who's currently applying to internships? Even more. Awesome. Pretty good. Cool. Well, hopefully after this talk, you'll be a little more comfortable with the application process and have some basic pointers. Anyways, let's get started. So before we get into like the exacts of like advice and things, we want to talk a little bit more about like the philosophy of internships. Oh, and backing up a little bit, who here studies computer science? Who here is looking for like a technical internship? And who here is looking for like a non-technical internship? What kind of internships are you guys looking at? Finance.
Data analytics.
Data analytics. And can't see it. Who else raised their hand? Product. Cool. All right. So it looks like there's no designers here. All right. So yeah, well, this talk is going to lean pretty heavily on engineering, but a lot of the general feedback or general advice will be, applicable to like every field. All right. So why get an internship? The obvious answer is money, but there's a lot of other reasons for getting an internship. Practice, you get to meet new people. Usually get to try something new since it's not like a big time commitment, and explore a new industry or role. But yeah, of course, everyone has financial obligations, so money's important too. But we want to highlight that it's not like the shit. Hopefully, it's not your number one priority. I want to judge.
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is like you want to get some kind of work experience on your resume before you graduate. Because if you graduate and your resume doesn't have anything with real industry stuff, then it might look a little weaker compared to other people's.
Yeah. So it's under the assumption if you're going to the work, hopefully you're working after graduating. And then backing up even further, like what is it even when we talk about like tech internships? What do we mean by like a tech company? You might know like the classic examples, like the big companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, whatever. But really, when we talk about tech companies, we mean companies with technology at their core. So it's often like a bit of perception and self-identification that we're referring to. So there's like a lot of technical positions at companies that we don't consider tech companies, but Tech at NYU, of course, thinks that you should probably be working a technical position at a tech company. The experience is probably better.
Yeah, I mean, every company out there is probably going to need software or engineering on some level, like even if they just make a website or something. But like tech companies with tech at their core, they're going to be innovating, creating new products. They're going to have a lot more money funneled into like new products that are tech focused.
A lot of it is just the experience you have as an engineer at these places, or even as a non-engineer. If you're working at places like these, they're usually more forward-thinking and have some other connotations that are sort of built into their structure. Usually, like they're more flat hierarchically, and a bunch of things. But also, there's some repercussions too.
I was also just gonna add that I think with like bigger companies, they also a lot of them have like better like tracks for interns. So if you're at like a company that has like a good, like strong internship community, there's gonna be a lot more guidance, which will kind of help you find your feet in like where
So tech companies will have like programs that are specifically for engineers. But yeah, there's obviously there's a caveat. Is like that there can be like a flip side to like working at a tech company too. And sometimes they move a little too quickly. And so it's something to balance your expectations with. Like anyone hear about like WeWork recently, like that. A brief bit about like the career in technology. Typically, like most people here are looking at engineering, but there's a bunch of things that you could do if you're not interested in that. Data science, ML, this sort of falls under engineering, but it's more as like a statistics discipline, less product development focused. There's design, of course, and there's product. There's so many here just interested in product, I forget who. But yeah, I would say product roles are more rare as for interns, but there's a couple good places you could be working at for these. A couple that come to mind are APM programs at Twitter, Yelp, Google, Facebook, Microsoft Garage. And of course, tech companies have typical roles as well. But we're going to be mainly looking at engineering, since that seems to be like our background, and also hopefully everybody's experience. Discovery. So this next part, we're going to be talking about how to find companies to apply to. Any questions? What's nice about like tech internships is that a lot of the companies that are great to work for are also companies you know of, because they're really consumer facing. So like the other ones that I brought up, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, whatever. So you've probably heard of them. They're and otherwise aware of like other companies through like the media, even if you don't use their products. So you get a lot of exposure to companies. So when you're applying, just think about what you know, think about what you like to use, and then you can apply it to places like that. If it's a really small company or like an app or something, even if they don't have positions online, you can send them an email. I recommend like cold emailing. You can find an email off like LinkedIn or something, and see if they even have positions of interest. But a thing to remember is that when you find companies this way, you can sometimes overlook B2B companies, business-to-business companies, and be focused a little too much on consumer-oriented stuff. So there's a bunch of great companies that serve enterprise users. And yeah, just keep that in mind. Also good luck.
Yeah. So actually, you can do the slide. You can do the slide.
A great place to look, other than the obvious choice of is just to go on Facebook groups. There's a couple pretty good ones. Ladies Start Hackathons, Hackathon Hackers. There's more than these. I can't come up with them off the top of my head, but especially if you're in like an underrepresented minority group, there's usually like a Facebook group for that. Yeah. And then we have also a Tech at NYU Facebook group, little plug. It's kind of not administered very well right now, but it's something we're looking to change.
So I mean, when you're thinking of places you want to apply to, I think the first thing that comes to everyone's mind is like, what companies have I heard of? So like, any kind of technology company or like, stuff you can find on Google, like LinkedIn, job postings, like you go there first. I think there's like a good amount of pressure in the room, so make sure, I don't know if you have already, but I know a lot of companies have freshman specific or minority group targeted intern programs. So I know about like Facebook University, Twitter Academy or something. Basically, they have a lot of these freshman, sophomore only programs, and generally those are a lot better, because like juniors can't apply to them. So they're going to be a lot more like they'll have more guidance, and generally the interviewing will be a lot less. Like they won't be trying to like pressure you a lot. It's more of like So and even if you're not a minority, so if you're not like I applied to those programs too. I never, but like it's still good. I mean, I think in the beginning, don't be picky. Like apply to everything you know, and apply like companies that like maybe when you don't have experience. I think I would apply everywhere. Basically,
Okay.
It's how I did it.
We also recommend just there's a couple like interesting. Gracehop already have it. There's you can go to talks at NYU. Usually ACM or even Tech at NYU holds company talks. If you're interning in San Francisco or New York during the summer, I know this event called Internapalooza. Apparently it's like a big job fair. I've heard really good things about it. I haven't been there myself. NYU, of course, holds a job fair. And then hackathons are, even if you go and don't fully participate, they have like usually job fairs at the very beginning. Uncubed is another website that I personally haven't used, but I've heard good things from other people about. And there's a series of like, I'm going to publish the slides after, but there's a series of GitHub lists that just it's basically just a huge table with like the position, the company, and some like notes about the application process with a link to it. So just a good place to get started. The way to like roughly evaluate a company, I like to think of in conceptually like based on size, and this is like a sort of imprecise measurement of how your experience will be. But typically, I like to break up companies into like the 3 size categories. Again, very imprecise, but it balances sort of your impact on the company, the structure, how structured your internship will be, and the compensation you can expect changes with the different size categories. For early stage startups, sometimes it's a good place for people with less experience to apply to some of these earlier stage ones, but they also
I think try everything. So yeah, like as Michael said, like the size of the company will determine generally how structured and their intern program is. So obviously, if it's like an early stage startup with like 5 employees, then like they're probably just gonna ask you to do something. Like a lot of it will be self-driven, like figuring things out on your own. So if that's like if that's the environment you're looking for, like it's definitely a good way to learn. Then usually the larger the company, the more like mentorship and guidance they have. I think a lot of big companies they usually have they assign like a one-to-one mentor. So you have like your guy to talk to if you need help or if you get stuck on something.
Yeah. So the key takeaway is that with smaller companies, typically you're on your own a little bit in terms of like direction-wise, and like you might have to like look a bunch of things up. As a result, your impact to the company as a whole will be pretty significant usually. A good place to like apply to these companies is a website called Angel. AngelList. Angel.co is the URL. That has like just a list of companies, and you can filter it by location and things. That's actually a thing for investors. But there's also a list published called Breakout List. This one, it's unclear how they pick it. Supposedly, it's a bunch of companies that will take off. This I would take with a grain of salt, but it's still, again, a list of pretty good startups that are funded and reputable. Other way, just to look at VC firms. These are all VC firms that you can just look at their portfolios of things that they've invested in recently. And accelerators, YC, Y Combinator is a pretty popular one, pretty reputed one. Techstars, incubators like DataWorks. So just look at their portfolios, and then typically, if they don't have positions online, you can try cold emailing them. And I mean, it shows a lot of initiative when you find an email and said like, "Hey, do you have any positions open? I have X, Y experience, really interested in learning." Yeah. And then other places, because some startups are just like, you won't have heard of them. You go online to TechCrunch, Product Hunt. You can find like different places that might be interesting. And then here's a link Ivana found, which apparently has a bunch of YC companies that are accepting internships. So yeah. The next like size category I would say is the mid-size or funded startup. This is like, I don't know, like 500 people, 500 up, 500 to 1,000.
Yeah, I don't know if Lyft is like.
Yeah, that should be removed. It's just these are from last year. I edited them. I should have gotten rid of it. So this very imprecise again, but these are like, this is the idea of like a large company with like sort of a startup-y mentality. These companies, you usually hear about them in the media because they raised pretty big rounds. Airbnb, Stripe, Square. Square's already called it. A bunch of these already called it. So yeah, it's a very imprecise measurement term, size. But
Yeah, I think like one of the things is like the point of an internship, besides like making money and all that other stuff, is like you want to get a general sense of like what kind of company you want to work for when you graduate, I guess. And like it's so much easier, like because internships are nice because you're allowed to hop around. You don't have to go back to the same place. But when you're full time, like hopping every year isn't a great idea.
yeah, it's rough.
So yeah, like internships, it's like the time when you can try stuff, and like that's what's important. So I think definitely if you've been at a big company, try a startup at some point. I hope
Maybe.
maybe.
You can try a mid-sized startup.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
Yeah, just try stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, these sort of places. Again, this is this list is pretty imprecise. But like a mid-sized startup is like a startup that's pretty well funded, so they have like a lot of runway. They can afford to pay you reasonably, usually competitive to the larger places. And the culture is more established, but still sort of startup-y. And there's a lot of potential for growth, but also there's a lot of potential for like death. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess keep picking on them, but I guess WeWork. If you want to read the news about WeWork, you should look it up later if you're not familiar. They have some really weird things where the founder like sold his own property to himself. Anyways, it's messy. So that's the risk you run. But
Yeah, I think one thing to add, I think these kinds of companies, they tend to move a little bit faster than I think the corporate companies.
yeah,
So like when you think corporate, those big Goliaths like Microsoft, I guess, like it's going to be a very different internship experience at like one of those places compared to like Airbnb, Uber, Lyft. These guys, yeah, generally, I think they have that startup mentality that actually affects your day to day a lot.
again, it could be a good or bad thing. It can be pretty messy. Yeah, and so the final category I would like to roughly break it down into is like the big company, like corporate. These of course, is the ones that you already know of. They're like very prestigious. and they're very well structured in terms of internship programs, but they can be they can have less ownership over your projects because I think like anecdote is like I have a friend who worked for Google Docs, and his like job was to make like I don't know the cursor. I forget exactly, but he had to do something that was like with a cursor, and he was like, oh, it was awful. So but as a result, I think he had some percentage increase in engagement that impacts like based on how many people use Google Docs, like the number of people he impacts is actually insane for like making some cursor change. So there it is. Yeah, so these companies you probably know of. These are the ones you know of. And finally, another great way to apply to companies is based on location. Being in New York, I'm assuming everyone here goes to NYU. There's a bunch of great companies in New York, and interviewing is a lot easier when you're located in the city. And there's usually a bias for these companies to want to hire locally because of interviewing things are easier. So here's a couple that we like. All the ones in bold, I personally endorse. In particular, Etsy. We love Etsy here at Tech at NYU. Don't ask me why. Great company. They have a like an arts and crafts thing on one of their floors. I think their office is not full yet. It's in Dumbo. Great location. Pay is great. People are great. Good company values. You should apply to Etsy. If you're looking.
Are they hiring?
They're hiring. They're hiring right now.
Right now. It's not sponsored.
Yeah, I've never worked at Etsy, but Etsy's a great place. I'm not just joking. It's actually a good place. But all those bolded companies are great places to work, including the non-bolded companies, and they all have New York offices. So something to think about. Yeah, New York usually is like. New York is sometimes is looked down upon. Like sometimes people from like Silicon Valley think they're all that, but New York has a lot of great tech companies. So
Yeah, I think so. For internships, generally speaking, I don't know how many companies. Okay, so depending on the company, they'll either onsite you or they won't. But yeah, like no. Some companies like they just skip it. But like so yeah, if the company is New York based and they want to onsite for their interview process, then being in New York helps because it's nice that they don't have to reimburse your flight basically. But yeah, so yeah, these companies, I would say like me and Michael, like one of the biggest differences is that like my approach to applying to internships was just shotgunning, like throwing as many apps out as I possibly could. Basically like any LinkedIn easy apply, like that takes 1 second, just click it, like basically throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks. I think Michael has been a lot more conservative in terms of the number, like more, personal, like reaching out to people, emailing. I think try everything. Like a lot of different approaches can lead to a job. So yeah.
I would say this is skipping ahead a little bit, but I would say if you're new, if you have no work experience, probably you want to apply to more places rather than. And if you don't apply, remember, if you don't apply to a place, there's no chance of getting the job. So
yeah,
don't be afraid of rejection.
Yeah, like a lot of people will say like, oh, like I don't want to apply to my favorite company, like Google right now, like because it's like I don't want to apply now because I'm not good enough at interviewing yet. Like I want to save that application. Like I think that's like probably the worst. Like it's a pretty bad mentality.
It's usually just a resume drop, so just do it.
And I think it's a lot more important to also have interview experience. So like my first couple of interviews, terrible, like absolutely terrible. Like Bloomberg, god awful. So like basically, but like you learn like failing is actually an experience and it helps you because like interview nerves.
Sometimes it's just your gut.
Yeah, like a lot of things. So like never be like afraid to apply to a company and never be afraid to interview with a company either. Like it's a learning process.
Yeah, cool. jumping ahead a little bit, but there's nobody here interested in design. But as an aside, I think that it's important to apply to places, or it's important to for places that have good design culture, because it usually trickles into the rest of the workspace and things. But yeah, if you're interested in anything design related, there's a bunch of great creative agencies in New York, and they usually are looking for technical positions too. So yeah, these are a couple. Upstatement is not in New York. This one's in Boston. Very one. Yeah, but also if you're just creative in general, find work you like. You can go to something like Brand New. There's a lot of great publications like that. And if you find work you like, usually there's a creative agency behind it, and you can apply to paid interns at NYC those are all paid design internships. And alternatives to an internship, you can work for the summer in a research position. There's a bunch of fellowship programs actually that I want to bring your attention to that are pretty good. These fellowships are typically run by a VC firm, and they connect you to an internship under one of their portfolio companies. And this might be an easier way to get into the smaller startups or even more reputable startups through the direct VC firm. And they usually have other experience, they'll have talks, speakers come in. So it's a very different experience.
Also, these slides we're gonna send them out.
Yeah, we're gonna post these slides online. So there's you can feel free to take pictures, but I will post them. Unfortunately, KPCB, so Kleiner Perkins, this one has closed. But this is one in San Francisco that matches you with companies like what's it? Pinterest on that list. Instacart is on that list. I think Airbnb is on that list. Stripe's on that list.
I think Slack.
Slack. Yeah, so that one is pretty, that's a pretty good one to apply to. Hack and Light, this is a fellowship I did when I worked at BuzzFeed. This is one that's pretty good for if you're an NYU student, especially if you are still relatively new to internships. I liked it a lot because there's a lot of a community aspect compared to some other internship experiences I've had. So yeah, I endorse it. They have round 2 applications. There's another one that's also run by a venture firm, BVP, and Ripple. There's another one by Ripple Ventures. I don't know as much about these, but they have a good portfolio companies, so that's what to look out for. Of course, there's also other fellowships. There's social innovation and tech fellowships that you can do. One in particular is the Impact Fellowship. Donna back there has done it. She's part of it. She's affiliated.
I'm on the Impact job.
She's affiliated.
But do it. It's super cool. Apply.
And it happens in January, so it's actually really optimal to do that.
There's also Rough Draft.
Oh yeah, Rough Draft Ventures.
We have some.
Rough Draft Ventures.
So,
It's not. Oh, but you can also go to nonprofit. So ACLU, Planned Parenthood, all have summer internship programs. I believe they're paid. I'm not sure.
I think, yeah, so, I mean, nothing is second to, interning, obviously, or, work experience, but if you can't get an internship, then I think it's important to get some kind of practical experience. Yeah, do something. Doing anything is better than doing nothing. So I think, fellowship programs, are really great. Research, basically demonstrate that you are coding. Demonstrate that you're not just sitting in your room, over the summer. And then even if, but even if you can't get a fellowship or a research position, I know sometimes it can be really weird and strange to reach out to professors and stuff. But I think a last ditch effort is to do side projects on your own. So I mean, when I was applying to internship positions in the beginning, my resume had 2 CS classes on it and no relevant work experience or anything. So I learned web and some game development. I just put that on my resume, and then in your interviews, they'll ask you about it, oh, what have you done? Oh, what is this? And I'll link a GitHub repo or something. I can talk about it. Yeah.
Can I add to that? I think also a great way to get some sort of theory for me to write down is hackathons. You can go to a hackathon and have 3 people head the project and you kind of just help out. And it really just is like a resume booster. That's kind of a weird thing to say, but if you don't have experience and go to a hackathon, you're going to be paired with people that do have experience, and you know, figure something out.
That's a life hack.
That's a life hack right
Going
there.
back to hackathons too, like, you can go there and not actually participate, like, there's workshops to help you learn, and like, everything's paid for anyway, so if you have an opportunity.
That was a good comment. So hackathons are great because, like, by the end of it, hopefully, like, you have some kind of project that you can talk about. I listed some hackathons I went to on my resume as well, and it's better than having a blank space there, so that's felt like, oh, like, you know, what'd you do there, what contributions you make, or something like that. And also at the hackathon, a lot of companies usually sponsor and show up, so, like, it's a lot better to have some real interaction with a person rather than just submitting an application online that just goes nowhere. Maybe no one will even see it. Yeah.
Cool. There's some other links. These aren't that important. Applying. Okay. The next big part of our talk is going to be about how to best apply for internships. So the first thing is timing. When do you want to apply? Usually for summer internships. So wait, let's break it up into like there's several internship times. Usually you are interning in the summer, 10 to 12 weeks. This is the most common. There are some internship programs that happen during the school year. Some happen during the fall, spring. I don't know too much about these. The J term, there's that impact fellowship. And alternatively, you can also apply for a co-op program, which is like where you have to take a whole like 2 semesters roughly to like do an internship. I don't know how many weeks it is. Like it's a lot, but you're basically working half the year. A couple programs are pretty famous for doing these, Northeastern and Waterloo in particular. I don't even know if Toronto. I don't know if Weather, maybe they do. Cool. But probably here for our summer internship stuff. It is October, but the conventional wisdom says to apply as early as possible. So usually the earliest applications open up at the beginning of August, and so and often for bigger places it's a rolling deadline. And the advice here is to apply as early as possible. So you know it's a bit late for like the early application timeline right now, but for next year, if you're applying again, I would have your resume ready at the end of the summer, hopefully updated with everything you've been doing over the summer, and then submit it right as the application gets open, because it really gives you an advantage in terms of slots fill up, and you want to interview even before school starts. That can happen, so it really puts you at an advantage. So early August.
I know. Yeah. So I know a lot of companies hire into the spring.
Yeah.
So don't think like if you didn't apply in August then you have no chance. Like I think throw everything out. If you haven't yet, just, you know, do it as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some companies they'll interview like as early as like late July, early August.
Yeah. So there's no reason to worry if you do miss this, but it will help you out if you apply earlier. I personally did get my first internship at Yelp in February, so that was really late. I applied in like November. But that isn't always the case. It's usually easier to get in earlier.
Yeah, just to add, like I got, like IBM gave me an offer in March, and then Amazon gave me an offer in April. So like, don't think that like any of these companies like it's like you have to do September, but it is a rolling like kind of deadline. So like, basically what companies are doing is like they have a certain amount of intern slots they need to fill, and they'll keep hiring and interviewing until they hit that limit. And so, yeah, the earlier the better.
So like where I was interning over the past summer, they actually filled all the slots, and then there's someone that emailed them later and like said exactly why they wanted to work at this company, and they like opened a new slot for them. So like if you're really excited about like one certain company, you don't get it, if you don't hear back and they're full, like definitely still try to talk to someone and see if you can do something, because it's just an internship, it's not full time.
Okay. So we're actually running lower on time, so I'm going to go faster through these next parts. The resume is really important if you're, especially if you're applying. It's just important. I'd say keep it at 1 page maximum, no exceptions. Unfortunately, although we usually, like, if you have experience that can go to 2 pages, it doesn't matter, keep it at 1 page. Name, email, yeah, put all these things down. Sometimes people will put school experience down. That's usually, relevant coursework is usually okay, but the priority is your work experiences and projects, especially if you want to. Personal projects are a plus. So we touched on this earlier, but if you have no work experience, it's better to have something on your resume than nothing. So extracurriculars, of course. So, you know, Tech at NYU is one. But personal projects are really important because you want to demonstrate that you're able to contribute in a meaningful way to the company, even if you have no work experience yet. My recommendation here is that if you have any sort of projects, you want to be able to have a link to it, but also not just put it on GitHub and then whatever, because they're not going to be able to see like what you've created. You maybe record a video demo. If you made it at a hackathon, you usually have a dev post listing, or even better is that if you have a live version of your application that people can use it. So you just get a domain name and publish it. Yeah, so again, hackathons are a great way to build these projects, but also clubs. There's some clubs on campus that are project-based bugs, and I think there's a new one called Torch. But also, Tech at NYU, hopefully we're running some more events that are more paid-friendly.
One thing to add, anything on your resume is fair game to talk about in an interview. So if you have a project listed there, you know, don't write a project you haven't done. Or like, make sure you can talk about everything on your resume. Because basically expect people to be like, oh, what is this project? What did you do? If you say nothing, then, well, it's like, why is that on your resume? So,
the important takeaway is also to be really specific when listing experiences and your projects. So you don't want to just be like, oh, I made an app or whatever, right? You want to quantify it with exactly what makes your project successful. If you can put a number to it, that's even better. Like a percent increase in conversion rate, for example, things like that. What tools you use, make it relevant, and have friends read it over. So this is important stuff. So a lot of the times people will be applying online and with a resume submission. That's fine and all. You can also cold email startups and go on LinkedIn. But I think the best way to apply is actually through a in-person recruiter. And this is like the key. If there's one takeaway from this talk, it should be that you should apply in person somehow. A lot of the times the resume screen online, you just dump it in. It's unclear how they even screen it. Like if a recruiter looks at it, sometimes there's even companies that like outsource it to like some algorithm somewhere. Which is, the ethics of that is bad. But yeah, so it's don't apply online because like the best way is to apply with a person. So you make sure you guarantee their eyes on your resume and that they're looking at it. And if you have like relevant, if you move further in the process, that you have a recruiter every step of the way. So the best way to do that is in person at hackathon, at job fairs, on-campus recruitment. This is a big one, big one. If the recruiter comes to the campus, NYU, then they're definitely the on-campus recruiter. Yeah, and so, and the other way is getting a referral. So sometimes NYU is not a recruited school, and so a referral is the next best way to like make sure that you're somebody actually sees your resume. So this is super important. It helps your odds of like hearing back. A lot of places will ghost you, so like this improves the odds of hearing back dramatically. Yeah, that's my advice.
Definitely in the beginning, like a lot. If you just apply online and you don't have a referral and you don't have like any sort of recruiter or anything like that, the chances that you hear back is going to be really pretty low. Like you can expect the majority of companies to ghost you. So basically, yeah, Michael's right. You want to avoid the online channel in as many ways as you can. So if you know somebody, if you know a recruiter, yeah, like
Email, you get swamped with spam, and so is your personal email. So I have a very professional email address. And then, yeah, other tip, which is not really a tip, but if you make cool friends, and usually they have cool jobs, so yeah, they can link you up with companies that are interesting. But I don't believe in the word networking, although that's a contentious point. Yeah, so just use your network, but don't network. Interviewing. Gonna breeze through this section because we're actually gonna probably host like a interviewing prep workshop later. Andrew will be in charge of that. But the general thing to know is that when you're scheduling an interview, just make sure you have a space ready. I recommend checking online. Boast has rooms, and also like the sad story is that I had a Facebook interview once and I booked a room in Boast, but I didn't check that it had cell service, and they were actually calling me with cell phone instead of like doing a video chat. So I had to end up taking the interview in my friend's room like 20 minutes late, and it went awful. So just make sure everything's set in advance is my pro tip. And always respond to your recruiter very fast because even if you don't know your availability yet, just send them a response really quickly. Just know that you're still interested. This is pretty straightforward stuff, like be able to describe yourself, be able to talk about yourself, and having talking points ready is a pretty good way to like know your resume and know what you want to emphasize. And yeah, they'll usually ask you some questions. And also prepare questions for the company to show your interest or things that you're legitimately interested in.
Like the biggest thing, like be able to answer, tell me about yourself. That's gonna happen almost every single time.
That's usually the first question.
Yes. Yeah. Make sure that you have an answer for why do you want to work for this company. It's only bad if you say nothing.
Yeah. Just look up something. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be sincere.
Yeah. And basically, like I think for like usually the things on your resume are pretty concise, so maybe a couple bullet points, but be able to have like a little bit more to talk about that. So like you'll be like, oh, can you talk a little bit more about X or Y, then you can expand about just a couple more sentences, stuff like that. Yeah. That's like that'll be in like the behavioral section of an interview. So like, yeah, moving on.
Yeah, it's important to remember that like the interview is not just to evaluate your technical skills, but also to evaluate your communication skills. And so just being able to comfortably talk about yourself will help your guys a lot.
Also, I feel like sometimes they won't prompt you like how you would expect them to, so they just kind of are silent because they want to hear what you have to say. So be able to like just say it, like even if no one asks.
And even if the interview is completely technical, like they don't ask you any behavioral questions, like in a sense, the interview is still I think a gauge of do I want to work with this person? Like would I want to work with this person? So yeah, I think having like a good attitude, like goes a long way. Don't sound like you're bored out of your mind during this interview. Yeah.
All right. Really quickly, the technical process is 2 to 3 rounds. Usually starts with an onsite or hacker rank, or phone screen, and then or hacker rank. Sometimes hacker rank, then phone screen, so like just a video call with a shared code pad, and then an onsite. Onsite's the final round. Sometimes they'll fly you out. Sometimes it'll be over a video chat. Doesn't really matter either way. It's the same style of questions. I would break down the technical questions into 2 major categories: algorithmic or competition style questions, and practical coding questions. So what do I mean by these? It could be a mix of both. But basically, the algorithmic questions are questions that you probably are material you studied in data structures or algorithms, basic algorithms, class here at NYU. Pick a language you know that is really easy, familiar for you to type quickly with or work quickly with. And yeah, just know some of the things that you have studied in these classes. The main thing is that you should be able to talk through the problem while you're doing it. Know the complexity. Usually they ask about how they know complexity. So yeah, questions like this will be like, oh, how do I sort some string in, I don't know, I can't remember all this stuff. But like, how many palindromes are in this string, right? That's like, usually the solution involves something with recursion, hash maps, or any of these data structures. A big one is DFS, BFS, graph traversal, depth first search, breadth first search.
Yeah, so in the future, like workshops, we're gonna go more in depth into like these, and basically, but at a high level, I recommend one, pick a scripting language, pick a language that's easy on the eyes, pick a language that people know. So I'd highly recommend Python. Just
Python is
that is my bias, but so on an onsite or on a CoderPad, think about it like you're going to have to be typing something out while talking to a person, or you're going to have to be writing code on a whiteboard while you talk to a person. And so in a phone interview, imagine if you're the interviewer and your interviewee is just typing away and he's completely silent for 3 minutes. That doesn't reflect that well on you. So you need to get really comfortable talking while explaining your thoughts while coding, which can be pretty difficult, but comes with experience and practice.
But ultimately, make sure you know the language well. So if you don't know Python, then don't use Python. Cool. So practicing. There's a site called Geeks for Geeks. Again, I'm going to publish these slides, so it's not that important. LeetCode is another really popular one where you actually get to run your tests in it. HackerRank is the same style. There's these books that people like to talk about, but generally the book material can be summarized in the material online, so it's not as important. If you're looking for specific questions for the company you're interviewing for, Glassdoor and CareerCup are great places that have the past questions usually. Usually doesn't change, like algorithmic or practical. And then so a practical technical interview is something like actually having to write something with a web server or something that's functional or resembles something functional. So a great example of a technical coding challenge is Etsy's, company I love, where they have you debug a web application. And you basically just have to be familiar with some of the, it's not hard per se, but it's like, there's like some very nuanced things you have to be familiar with, and doing it quickly can be a challenge because it's under a time circumstance. So just being familiar with, especially if you have experience from past internships, picking up some web development skills usually will help you out. So examples of this is like a rate limiter. Like how would you design a rate limiter? And then they'll actually have you code like a toy example. So web development is probably. And when in doubt, you just ask for who kind of interviews. They usually will you. These are some good resources to practice technical interviews. We're going to host a session to practice them later, TBD. And finally, the last category is deciding. So this is not that important for people here, probably. Unless, how many people have offers in hand? Okay, that's why you're here. But for when you do land these internships, thanks to our event, you will usually get a couple weeks to sign, 1 to 2. You can always, almost always, I should say, ask to extend the deadline, and usually they'll extend it for a week or so. So this is something to pay attention towards when you're timing your interviews, because you want to land the offers at roughly the same time, so you can make some choices between them. Yeah, and negotiation is not that relevant for internships, I would say. But you could try. I wouldn't recommend it. It's an internship. If you're not sure, like if you have a couple companies that you've got offers for, there's a couple ways to evaluate, I'd say. I would avoid unpaid internships generally. This actually has less to do with money than it is to do with your value at the company. If you're unpaid, then sometimes there's the company will like not know what to do with you because they don't have to think about, they're not like losing some concrete resource to like keep you there. So like they'll make you like do errands sometimes. So this is just something to think about. It's just again, if you really want experience, you can take an unpaid internship, but just something to keep in mind. Compensation, otherwise, I would say tech compensation is usually pretty good. There are some websites that you can see for like roughly what you can expect to make. What's the other website that you called?
Apply.fyi.
There's a site called apply.fyi. Some of those numbers there are really scary, but yeah, that's like some actual compensation numbers. You can also ask us specifically, yeah. And then location. So there's jobs outside of tech can be a good idea to optimize the location you're in. And it's also a good idea to look at the role or position you're being offered at. So, for example, at something like self-driving division is very valuable to be at these days, like Lyft, level 5, or something like that.
L5.
L5. There's a name for the team, and you'll be aware if you're on it or not, or like ML positions are really popular these days. And then also to the size note from before and your team size. So that can all help your experience. If you're really unsure, then you can email your recruiter, and oftentimes they'll even put you in contact with somebody who is from the company, and they can talk to you about your decision. Glassdoor also has reviews. Facebook, you can go on those Facebook groups to ask. Reddit Team Blind has usually some information, but since these are anonymous, like sometimes, like I don't know, I would take their advice with a grain of salt, but just to get some exposure. And then you can even ask people on LinkedIn. So be less selective early in your career. But ultimately, you decide what's important for you. So there's no right choice. And finally, this is our moral of the story today, is even if you don't land an internship, it's okay. If, as you know, early in your career, for a lot of the freshmen here, or even sophomores, companies will prioritize junior and senior hires because they convert to full-time. So don't get time will come. Yeah, but if you really are interested in landing an internship, then building projects to build up your resume, learn some technical skills on your own time can be really helpful. And you can feel free to ask me if you want resources to learn some of these things on your own or class suggestions. Project clubs. So we talked about there's some clubs at NYU actually that focus on projects. I'm actually not familiar with specifically, but Bugs is supposed to build cool projects. And then, yeah, Tech at NYU is thinking about introducing something like that, TBD. Yeah. So yeah, you have your whole life to work, so don't worry about the internship. Take a vacation. You have so much. Once you start working, you're probably going to be working for a while. Let's put it like that. So I feel like I wouldn't stress even if you don't get the internship. But hopefully, from our presentation, get some tips on how to land it.
Yeah, especially like as a freshman or sophomore, don't think it's the end of the world if people around you are working and you're not, because it definitely is not the decision maker, or like it doesn't have like as in the short term, like you'll think it has such a grand effect on your life, but in the long run, like you'll be fine. It's not that important.
Anyways, finally, are there any questions? Yes.
If you have like only non-tech internships on your resume, would you say that's like a disadvantage? How would you address that during?
I don't think so. But
So actually, I wasn't a CS major before. So as a freshman, I worked for a bank doing like Excel stuff, and I think my resume was definitely weaker because I didn't have like a technical experience or anything. But basically, I listed my experience, my non-technical experience, and then I put some projects. And then when they say like, tell me about yourself, I said like, oh, I work for a bank. I didn't like it. I don't like Excel. Here I am now. Like I also like I did some projects on my own to try to learn on my own, like to demonstrate interest and demonstrate that I'm doing stuff. And so I think try to spin it in a way that makes you look a little better.
I can add to that. So I didn't really do that much technical stuff. I'm a CS major, but like I'm not going into that technical role now. And at the end of the day, like that makes you more unique. So there's a lot of good spin as to why like that experience like changed you or like gives you an edge, then you're fine. Like I do photography on the side, and a lot of the recruiters are like, oh, like you should use this person at our company. Like everything kind of plays a role if you make it like interesting.
Oh yeah, and as just a general plug, next week we're going to be hosting a Q&A panel with some people who have interned before, in case you're interested in showing up. So you should RSVP on Facebook for that. And yeah, I'll probably be sending out some feedback forms in case hopefully those people who left fill it out. But yeah, just want to see like how you like the event and how it could be improved. Anyways, other questions?
you know, like you can ask questions on them. So that'll be for our next event. If you guys have questions, so be sure to follow.
Yeah, and then in the future, we're going to be running some events that are more, like this was a bit of a talk, this is also interactive, but we're going to be running some events that are like code-alongs, and we're having a future art festival. And there's a bunch of stuff. So like us on Facebook,